My name is Elham Manea. In Arabic, it's Elham Manea. I'm a political scientist, a human rights advocate, and a writer. And I'm sort of a mixed salad, if you may say, in terms of my origins. You could say I'm Swiss, I'm Yemeni, I'm Egyptian as well. I have to say that women's rights advocacy started because of personal reasons. Each one of us has a story. My mother's story was the one that really pushed me to be a fighter for rights, for the protection of dignity and rights of the human being, regardless of that human being gender. I think of advocacy in different terms. I'm a writer, I said, and when I write in the forms of literature, novels like Echo, where I wrote about my mother, opinion articles, where I wrote Diary of an Arab Woman and demanded reforms, specifically when it concerns women and religion. And finally, social science. I'm a political scientist. I work in an interdisciplinary manner, and I think of social science as something that has to be very close to the people. Social science has a role in tackling problems, phenomena, and finding solutions. And for me, social science, my research, the way I conduct research, has this purpose. It's not separate from our reality, and it seeks solutions as well. So that's one thing when it comes to my background. When it concerns Yemen, I wrote about different context in the Middle East and North Africa, Yemen as my country of origin, my roots, my wound. And my wound because the country is going through a civil war, and that civil war is impacting the lives of people living there. Women are the first to feel the impact of that war. And just like in all war zones and conflict zones, gender-based violence is very much widespread in both public and private. And you see that in terms of domestic violence, abduction, rape, sexual harassment in public spaces, early marriage, physical threats, and attacks towards female activists, and specifically women human rights defenders. They face intimidation, constant intimidation, and the changes in the religious environment as well have had particular effects on women, especially as the rise in radical religious rhetoric and greater influence of Islamic actors have impacted the lives of women in Yemen. When it comes to women in war zone, again, if I talk about Yemen, on the one hand, you see this paradox. On the one hand, women are more economically active than they were before. They are the breadwinner in many households. They work constantly to alleviate the work conditions for their own families. So they're playing an essential role in delivering local humanitarian response. But that said, if I'm going to talk about Yemen, just like in other conflict zones, you have women who are active in the role as members of parties to the conflict. That means that they are parties to the conflict as well, but other women are playing an important role as peace builders on the ground. I have to say. That when it concerns women activists, Yemeni women activists, they're very vocal. They're only followed by those who are following the Yemeni conflict. So when I say very vocal, I mean that you have certain platforms and organizations that bring many women organizations, Yemeni women organizations, together and try to push for changes. Unfortunately, just like in many conflict zones in the Middle East and elsewhere, when it comes to peace negotiation, very often women are excluded. And if they are present, it's done by the insistence of the special envoy to the conflict, the UN special envoy to the conflict, but they are not able to shape the negotiation due to also the perception also from the international community that those who should set the tone for the peace process are the ones who are holding the guns. And that is a very problematic situation that we are having and Yemeni women are having, and not only in Yemen, you see it also in other conflict zones in the region and outside the region. Connected to this, on the one hand, you see a tendency that women are perceived as not the one who are really impacting the negotiation, the peace process. They are not really relevant from that perspective that I mentioned before. However, if you look on the ground, in reality, what is taking place, those who are making a difference are women groups who are working with whichever structures around them. So on the one hand, women were very important in negotiation to release prisoners inside of Yemen. They are very important in terms of facilitating humanitarian aid. They are very important on the basis of their local communities. But at the same time, when it comes to peace processes, they are not included. And that is an issue that I find not only problematic, but indicative of whether this peace process will be sustainable in the long run or not. Now, just a quota of women participating in the peace process is not enough. That's not enough. Why? Because unless we think in a manner that integrates the grievances, the needs, and the perspective of women, that means integrating a gender perspective in all the peace processes, the power sharing agreements, and the rebuilding of the institutions in the country, again, exclusion will take many ways. And that gender situation, I mean, Yemen ranks at the bottom of the gender index, and it is a rank that it held for 13 years, and it shows how dire the situation is for these women. But what I'm trying to make sure that we understand from this talk is that, yes, the situation is dire. Yes, there is a persistent tendency to exclude them in the real negotiation, because you will see there will always be talks, there will always be meetings with the envoy, with whatever, with the donor countries. But when it comes to really these meetings that will decide the future of the country and its institution, they are excluded. That is taking place. But on the other hand, you have women with agency pushing for changes, making a difference on the ground, but they are not heard. And there's only one way to be heard, and that is just keep doing what you're doing until it's difficult to ignore what you're doing. I would basically say on the one hand, make sure that this Yemeni war and Yemeni crisis is being talked about, that continuing this war is not acceptable, but at the same time making sure that the gender perspective is being integrated in whichever peace agreement that will be reached. And that demands that we coordinate our efforts. That demands that when we talk, that we understand that these issues are, in fact, something that takes place in all war and conflict zones. And as such, we have to think collectively and work collectively, push in the United Nations, push in the donor countries, make sure that these are not just promises, words, just basically something that you cut and paste and put it in your report about the funding programs that you're doing. Implement it, make it a reality. And that demands from all of us, don't forget this country, don't forget its women, don't forget that violence in different shapes is really tearing this society apart. And women are the first in Yemen to bear the brunt of that violence.